This podcast provides a platform to discuss important questions and complex issues, challenge the status quo, and confront the boundaries of the establishment. I'm retired police chief Daniel Hahn. I went from being arrested at 16 to serving over 34 years in law enforcement. My goal is to keep you informed with news not being reported, voices not being heard, and the untold history of how we got here so that we can create a way forward. Pleasure to welcome our guest today, Merv Brookins, somebody with a rich history, both in the community, spent many years incarcerated. So without further ado, I want to welcome Mr. Merv Brookins.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, a lot of times people think that those who have been to prison were like gang members selling dope on the corner and all those things. Your story was a little different. If you would, tell us kind of a little bit of how you grew up, what you were doing, where you were headed when you did what you did that sent you to prison.
Okay. I always call my story in the blink of an eye. And I say that because in the blink of an eye, you can go from one extreme to another. And that's kind of like what happened with me. I grew up in Del Paso Heights, middle-class family, never believed that I wanted for anything. I, certainly didn't have any physical wants, and pretty much well-off family. We did okay. Played football at Grant, was successful, of course.
Where'd you play football?
At Grant High School, state champions, by the way. And went on to Sac City College, which at that time was one of the top programs in the nation. Going to City then was better than going to some universities. So I went there, and from there I went on to Southern Oregon State University on a scholarship, doing well, playing well. And my junior year, right after midterms, I decided to come home for spring break. A Christmas break. Came home and saw some of the guys in the neighborhood that I grew up with, and I knew they were involved in extracurricular activities, but hey, your friends are your friends.
Right. So
I decided to hang out with them, and in the blink of an eye, I went from football athlete, college athlete, to prison. I say that because I got involved in some of their business, drugs and things like that, and ended up going to jail. And I literally went from December of that year to August of the next year, from Southern Oregon State Prison to Pelican Bay. From Southern Oregon State University to Pelican Bay. It was really that fast, 8 months. And for the next 21 years, I was behind bars.
So as somebody that wasn't really in trouble growing up, what was the adjustment to prison when you first went there? Because you hadn't really been in much trouble before that point. So you went from really college student, college athlete to inmate at a prison. So what was that? What was it like when you first got there? How did you transition?
Well, I went from never having a case, not being one of those guys that hung out in the streets and knew the street code and knew the street life, to not only going to prison, but going to the worst prison, and probably the United States. So the adjustment was real, and it was fast, and it was scary. Don't ever let anybody tell you that prison isn't scary. And the only thing I knew about prison at that time was what I seen on TV. If they looked at you funny, you better do something before they do something to you. And that was my mentality at that time, because I didn't know anything different, and I was too scared to find out anything different. So my adjustment was quick. I think the first week that I was there, I had 2 fights, and I don't even know if I started those fights or not, but I was so scared. I looked up, and I'm in 2 fights, and I'm in the hole. Literally my first week and a half in prison. And so from then on, that's what life was like the next several years.
And I've heard you say many times you were I think it's something like, I was some special kind of stupid, or I was stupid, something along those lines. So what did you mean by that? And at what point did that change to where you stopped being that person and started working towards getting out and doing something for others?
Well, I say I was a special kind of stupid because normally guys, you see guys get in, you see guys come home from prison and go back. They get out, they commit another crime, and they go back. I was a special kind of stupid because I didn't wait to get out to commit another crime. I committed another crime while I was in prison doing a life sentence, which is the worst sentence you can have. So, and the reason that was so was because I adjusted to prison life. Even though I gave lip service to wanting to come home and wishing I was home, in reality, I had accepted prison as my fate, so I made myself comfortable. You know, if I'm gonna be here, I wanna be as comfortable as I can. And so I started getting involved in prison politics, the drug trade in prison, and that's how I ended up catching another case. I think I was caught with a pound of weed in prison.
Inside prison.
Inside prison, yeah, inside prison. And that's how I ended up catching another case. By this time, I worked my way from Pelican Bay, the maximum security, down to dual vocational institution, a medium security, and ended up with, I think it was around about a pound of weed.
And while you were in custody, did you take classes, whether they're college classes or vocational training or any of that sort of thing?
Every class there was.
Okay.
I took it for the sake of taking it, though. Just like when I was going to school, when I was in college and I was going to college, from the outside looking in, you would think that, you know, I got it together. I got my head on straight. I'm in school. I'm playing ball. But that wasn't the case. I was in school, but I was only in school to play ball. There was nothing intentional about my success.
Right.
If it hadn't been for football, I wouldn't have been in college. So while it looked like I had structure and I really didn't. No one ever sat down and said, hey, you know, this is the direction you can go, and this is what, I never received that. So outside looking in, yo, Merv is doing well. He's up there in school, he's balling out, and Merv is up there living day by day until it came to football. And if a cute girl was in class, then I would go to that class. Other than that, it was success by accident. So when I went to prison, the same, that same lack of structure and lack of purpose caused me to get involved in prison lifestyle.
And I've heard you talk a few times. I think you went to a couple parole hearings and were denied. But before your last parole hearing, where you were actually granted your release, something happened with you, your mindset. If you talk a little bit about that and how you ultimately got out.
So, you know, prison is not a place where there are a lot of good people. And, you know, even prisoners get tired of prisoners, being around prisoners. And after, I think, my 15th or 16th years, the dynamics of prison started changing. You start seeing a lot of younger kids come in that really didn't give a damn, for real. They would start a riot just for the sake of being bored. And so the prison population changed. The rules that govern prison that kept everybody, you know, in their place, those started getting blurred. And it really became, it sounds funny, but it really became a nasty place to be. And I literally just got tired of being around those people. And that's when I got serious about wanting to come home. So I had always been book smart. So when I got to prison, I engaged in the programs that were made available, self-help programs, and a lot of them were programs just for the sake of saying they offered program. They really didn't offer any real insight to help a person help themselves. So by my 15th or 16th year, I started thinking, and this was after I had been denied parole maybe twice. And I started thinking, well, damn, I got to get out of here. And the next question, well, how do you do that? And so I had to become a better me. Ultimately, if you want to get out, become a better you. And so that's what I did. I took some of the college courses that I had done, and I took chapters. Communication was one chapter. And I rewrote the chapter so that the guys inside prison could understand it where they were. And so I started groups just sitting at a table just like this. There were 4 of us that started, and we went over that chapter. And then we took another chapter, conflict resolution. And I rewrote that to where these guys could understand it. And it literally took off from there. But what I discovered within those groups is that a lot of us have the same rivers running through us. We all have some common problems that we face growing up in certain neighborhoods. Belief systems, growing up believing things that's simply not true, and
Believing like what kind of stuff?
believing like you don't talk to the police.
Right.
The police are the enemy. Street code, don't snitch, don't talk.
When we all know that isn't truly the case at all times.
It's not the case. In fact, the person that's most adamant talking about don't talk to the police is normally the person that's talking to
Exactly.
the police. But a lot of the street code, ride with your partner no matter what. If this your boy, you ride with him. Different things that we learn as children out in the street, and we just never overcome. Another one was accepting responsibility. We all had a tendency to blame other people for the situation we were in. And that was convenient because it relieved us of the responsibility for fixing ourselves. So things like that, I noticed was common to everybody, low self-esteem, and where that came from. So I took those commonalities and created an entirely different course to just address those. But as I was doing that to help others, I was helping myself. So about my 17th year, about my second year into doing this, I went to the board, and I thought I was ready. And I prayed. I was like, God, hey, give me a date. Just let me go, and I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and I thought I was ready. I went, and I ended up going to the board and got smacked with a 2 year.
They said you weren't ready.
They said I wasn't ready. Smacked with a 2-year denial. Come back and talk about it in 2 years. And I was discouraged, and that was like my 3rd time going to the board. And then, but I went back and I dug deeper, and I really started challenging myself about becoming a genuinely better person and helping others along the way. So the next time I went back, I'm like, I got this. This is my 4th time. I'm like, God, I know we ready now. And I prayed for a date again. God, just let me go home, please. And, because I'm ready. I did everything. And this year I got smacked with a 1-year denial. And I was extremely discouraged. It's getting shorter, but I was hurt. I was hurt because meanwhile, my daughters growing up, without me. And I went back, and that year seemed like it went by so fast. And the time came up for me to go back to the board. For whatever reason, I didn't pray for God to give me a date. I said, God, whatever happens in this hearing, please, just give me a testimony. Just give me something that I can come back and share and be genuine, that others can be blessed with. And, I didn't share this during the class, but I had a bunkie that I couldn't stand. He was from L.A. He thought he was Bruce Lee. Couldn't stand this dude. Didn't even talk to him, actually. And before I left, when I got ready to leave the building, he said, Merv.
To leave to go to the hearing?
To leave to go to the hearing. He said, Merv, just remember one thing. And I was like, this dude is finna mess up my vibe on my way. And he said, God can do all things. And I said, wow. Oh, I can do all things, right? And I said, well, that was my favorite Bible verse, through Christ who strengthens me, and and I was like, wow, that was a pleasant surprise. So I said, okay. So then I go over to the building where the officers are that's gonna take me. And so I'm outside waiting, and I'm just praying, don't nobody mess up my vibe. I'm in the right mind. And I'm waiting for the officer. You never know which one you're gonna get. And the worst officer in the world came through that gate, through the door, to escort me. And I'm like, oh, here we go.
Another sign.
Here we go. But we walk over there, and right before he pushes the button for them to open up the door, he says, remember, you can do all things
Wow.
And it blew me away.
Wow.
And it seemed like I went through that door and they called me into the hearing and I sat down and I got up and I was a free man. It was
Wow.
really that quick. And what was ironic about it is every year that I prayed to be set free, I was denied. The year that I prayed for a testimony, I was set free.
Wow.
And I've been home trying to. I told the hearing commissioner, which was a retired chief of police out of Marin. I said, "Man, I'm just asking you to raise your hand for me, and I know what that means when you raise your hand for me. And I promise you, I won't let you down." And he did, and he gave me my date. He gave me my freedom. And every year since I've been out until he retired, I've gone back to their open hearings to let him know that I've honored my word and his belief in me.
Wow.
He's retired now, but I still go back once a year. So
Good. So you've mentioned classes and programs and books, some of which you took advantage of, some of it you were just going through the motions, and some of it you actually helped other folks in custody through those books and those classes. So what do you say to the people that go, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't commit any crimes. I got to pay a ton of money to go to classes. I got to pay money to go to college. Why are we giving these inmates all this stuff? They should just be in there busting rocks or, spending their time doing manual labor, not wasting our time providing these educational or vocational or other type of experiences to these cats.
Well, on one level, I think it's just about being human and humanity and helping the next person who's had a different life than you for whatever reason, the choices that they made. And that's one level. But another level is people get out. And not only do they get out, but they have influence while they're there. If you create a population of people that just goes to prison and sit in prison and eventually you release them back into society, you're just kicking the can down the road, because sooner or later, that very person that you refused to help while they were there may be the person that come home and rob you or a member of your family, or, so it's on one level it's selfish. It can be seen as selfish. Well, I'm gonna help you so later on you don't bother me. But on another level, man, I think it's just a matter of human kindness. You want to uplift. I believe we should all uplift everybody that we can, and that's without judgment. People make mistakes, and you hold people accountable who do, and that's key. This is not about love a thug or hug a thug. It's really about accountability. And within accountability is you help a person understand how they got to that point. A lot of people don't realize it's not how you treat a person while they're there that's the punishment. The punishment is just being there, being separated from society.
It's a good distinction.
That's the punishment. How we treat people while they're there is more reflection of society's values than the individuals that's there. So
what you're saying is, no matter what the people did that are there, some really horrific crimes, they're still human beings.
They're still human beings.
Yeah.
They're still human beings, and everybody deserves to be treated with dignity, even when they don't realize it themselves, for whatever reason, But again, it's how I treat you is not a reflection of you or what you did. It's a reflection of me and my beliefs, and I thoroughly believe that, and I think society has a lot of power to help people help themselves when they're in that situation. And everybody, some people may get it the first time, some people may get it the second time. I know guys that have gotten in a fight in a club and had to go sit in the county jail for 2 hours, and that was it. They never, that was enough, right? But then I know other guys that have been in and out, and don't seem to get it right. Even for me while I was there, I had so many false rock bottoms. I've been to the hole, which is where they send you when you can't get along with everybody in the general population. I can't even tell you the number of times I've been in the hole. Probably just the amount of time as I spent in regular population, but I kept having false rock bottoms. I'm like, you know what? This is it. I'm
Nope.
finna get my stuff together. I'm gonna stop doing this, and this is it. I swear I never can. I'm telling my girl and the kids, I'm finna do this. I'm finna do this, and a month or two later, I'm back. I had several. I literally woke up one time in the hole and didn't even know I was there. It was so common.
So how old were you when you went in, and how old were you when you got out?
I believe I was 20 when I went in, and I was 41, 42 when I got out.
So chronologically, you were a young person when you went in.
Oh, yeah.
And a middle-aged person basically when you went out. And I've heard you a couple times talk about some of your biggest challenges when you first came out, things at the store and at a stop sign in your car.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's good for people to hear what some of those biggest like mental challenges, even with your father at the house. Tell us a little bit about that. What your challenges were.
Arrested development is real. I'd heard that before and never really understood it, but that is real. It's kind of like when you go into prison, to adjust and make it in prison, you got to turn off certain normal processes in your life, like emotional development. You can't be in prison emotional, so you kill that off immediately. Then you don't have the normal interactions that you do in society to help you grow socially normally. So all of those things stop at the age you were when you went in. When I came home, I was 44 in chronologically, but mentally and intellectually, even though I had studied and did self-help, I was still that 21-year-old kid who had never experienced anything in his life other than play football. Never lived out on my own, didn't have rent, no bills. I was still that kid. Right. So coming home, I was reliving that. I know I shared with you, I came home Christmas Day in 2009. The next day, Grant had a football game. And everybody had heard that I was home and they was looking forward to seeing me. So my brother took me to the Super Walmart in West Sac to get me a jacket. And we got inside the store, and I think I might have been maybe 10, 20 feet inside the store. And I grabbed him, and he was like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, we got to go. And he's like, what's wrong? I'm like, man, we got to go. And I just kept saying, we got to go. And I was having an anxiety attack, I guess, because people were walking by so fast, and it was scaring the hell out of me. And he didn't understand. He realized that I was going through some prison stuff, so he took me and left. But what I was experiencing in prison, people don't walk fast. Yeah, there's no fast walking. If you're on a track and you're jogging, that's one thing. But if you're in a walking space, you better be walking slow, because if you're walking fast towards someone, they're gonna think you're getting ready to be aggressive. So coming in Walmart and experiencing that, it freaked me out, and it took me a while to get used to that. Another time I was in line somewhere I was getting a snow cone for my grandbaby. And the person, it was a lot of movement around. This is a little later on, but there's a lot of movement in that area because there's a kids area. And this person came and stood in front of me. Not intentionally, just didn't know that we were in line. And in my mind, I'm thinking that was disrespectful. And you did that on purpose. So what am I gonna do? Am I gonna just hit you in the back of your ear? Or
right,
this is what I'm going through.
Right.
And I'm really having I know you did this on purpose. So I'm looking at them and, trying to just wait for them to turn around. And something told me, like, man, you might be wrong here. And my grandbaby was there, so I just let it go. But things like that took a while, years. And even to the day, I know I shared with you when I first came home at 44 years, I was afraid of the dark. Didn't like that at all. Afraid of being in the house by myself.
Why is that?
Well, because one, in prison, you're never alone. You're always around somebody. It's not like you're in dark spaces. Everything is where people can see. So there's no darkness in prison other than the mentality, because the guards always you have to be visible. So being at home and being by myself, it was me and my dad living together, and when he would leave in the evening, I'd be like,
At 44 years old, you scared to be at home by yourself.
at 44 years old, I literally took baseball bats and put them by the doors in the house when he was gone. And I was always looking out the window. I was afraid of the dark. It was an adjustment, a mental adjustment.
So along those same lines, as somebody with these experiences, both in custody and then the challenges of coming back out, are things that were all new to me. And I remember one time you asked me if I was a parole agent and I had somebody on my caseload that I had hooked up with a job interview and they were going to get this job. And I think you asked me if they didn't show up to that appointment, what would I think if I was a parole agent? And I think I responded to you, well, clearly I wasted my time, right? They didn't want that job. And I remember you told me that that might be true, but there's also some other possibilities. Explain what what that kind of thought process is for somebody to go to an interview.
So coming home, and I shared with you before, you're because you're making this transition and you have all these mental and psychological roadblocks that we don't like to tell people about, because I'm 44 years old, and if you just meet me, you're going to expect for me to respond as a 44-year-old man. But I don't have all those faculties. I don't have that development. So I don't want to tell you that and embarrass myself. So a lot of us are still in it's easy, as I always say, it's easy to get out of prison, but it's harder to get prison out of you. And that situation speaks to that. When guys come home, most of the population in prison are illiterate, can't read or write. Guy comes home and he genuinely wants to work and do better, but he got these issues that he's dealing with. So he goes to his parole officer and says, hey, can you help me find a job? And the parole officer says, yeah, go see Jesse tomorrow. Jesse got a job for you, no problem. Well, tomorrow comes and he doesn't show up. When the parole officer calls Jesse and asks him, well, did Charles show up? He says, no, I never seen Charles. So then Charles, the parole officer, naturally would think, well, you really didn't want that job.
Right.
Otherwise, you would have went. And that's the way parole officers, most of them view it. Rightfully so. Whereas I would have looked a little deeper and said, well, why didn't you show up? And explore that with him. And chances are, it's been my experience in the past that guys don't show up for job interviews because the first time, as soon as they get there, what's the first thing they do? In fact, this happened yesterday.
Got to fill something out, right? Read something.
Got to fill something out. I took a guy to the Urban League yesterday for a job and to walk through this process. The first thing they did was he sat down with him and gave him a packet of paperwork to fill out. Well, Charles can't read or write, man.
Right.
And he knows that when he goes, that's what you're going to do. So now he's faced with having to tell you, I can't read or write. It's embarrassing, and he knows he's not going to get the job. So why go? Not that he didn't want the job or couldn't do the job, but that's the mental barrier that he had to get through before he could even get to the job. And that happened yesterday. Fortunately, this guy could. But as I was working with the lady at the Urban League, I said, this is a problem. If I'm going to bring you guys people that need help, needs employment, you can't just stick this in front of them and say, fill this out and walk away. Fortunately, this guy could read or write, but the majority of them won't be able to. So we got to put things in place to address that. And we did. One of them, she said, well, I can email it to you and you can help them fill it out before they get there.
So one of the things I've always been impressed with you and starting an organization called Brother to Brother, in a second I'll ask you to say what they do. But, I've come to look at this a little differently than I did when I was younger. And that is, some people go to college, get a degree, go to more college, get other degrees. But I think everybody has like a degree, basically, right? So you were in prison for 20-some years. So that's a degree, in my opinion. Yeah. That's an experience that is beneficial to others in our community. As long as you're not continuing what got you in prison,
yes,
those skills and knowledge can be used. So explain what Brother to Brother and organizations like Brother to Brother can do for people who don't show up to that interview or many other things because they're embarrassed, the fact that they can't read or write, or some other issues with the experience that Brother to Brother has.
Well, what Brother to Brother can do, we can be life coaches or mentors for individuals that's taking that journey, because we've been there, and chances are we understand where that person is psychologically, emotionally, and we can help bring them out of that mental prison. And it's key to having the experience of being there, because you got to be able to see what's not necessarily visible and hear what's not being said. And the only way you can recognize that is someone who's been in those shoes themselves. So we can be that bridge. We can also be a model of not only to the guys that are coming home, but also to society to show who and what they can become if given the opportunity. So we play a dual role. On one end, we're modeling what you can do as a person that's offended, and coming home. And on the other end, we're showing society, hey, this is who we are. I dress like I do deliberately when we have those presentations. So, and I do the same when I go to the Board of Prison Terms, so they can see a different picture of the person who's offended before, because a lot of them don't have that perspective. So Brother to Brother, we try our best, and not everybody in Brother to Brother are perfect. We're
Not anybody anywhere is perfect.
Yeah. But it's a process, and we're trying to help guys along that process and more. And that's why I want to go back inside a prison and show, man, you can do this.
Right.
There's nothing special about me or anyone else. We didn't have a leg up or a hand up, but we can be that model, that tangible model that they can put their hands on and say, man, we can do this too. And help walk guys along. That guy that came to Urban League yesterday, he'd been out for a couple of months looking for a job, right? But he never would go until I said, I'll go with you.
Right.
And he was there, and I think they found some placement for him. So,
well, I mean, I don't know too many people that their babies go off to college without them going with them initially too. I'm going through that with my oldest daughter right now, and we're right next to her the whole way while she's trying to apply and figure out which college she's going through. So it's not unique to somebody that's coming out of prison. Like people in all of our lives, we need somebody to assist us. And what I've always found great about Brother to Brother is most of the people in Brother to Brother have gone through that journey. So they know what it takes to go from that environment and be successful out. So a couple more questions for you. One of the unique things about Brother to Brother, and it's absolutely not because you aren't critical of law enforcement when law enforcement is wrong, because you've called me on multiple occasions when you felt officers were wrong. You've still done that after I left. But now, and a lot of times in a lot of neighborhoods, like for example, even me, I didn't get into a lot of trouble growing up in Oak Park, but I also wouldn't have been hanging out at the police station either. And I didn't hate police, but I would have been worried about what people thought about me if I was hanging out at the police department. So I wasn't strong enough, or whatever you want to call it, to be able to withstand that. But one of the things about you and Brother to Brother is, one, you started coming out to the academy. You have a whole block of instruction at the academy with the recruits in the academy, that the purpose was to expand their experiences of what somebody coming out of custody is like. And like you said, you always wear a suit, and they think you're like the social worker, I think, until the end when you tell them your story. But I know you've gotten some heat from all walks, from the police department, from your own community, which is probably the hardest heat anybody can take besides their family. So what is it that makes you say that we need to partner with the police department in a community that many people think is over-policed and has all sorts of issues with law enforcement, yet you have managed to be able to partner with the police department, in my opinion, make things better for everyone?
Well, I know and I understand the police can't do it by themselves, and the community can't do it by itself. So we got to partner. But, and it just doesn't make sense it didn't make sense to me when I started hearing people talking about getting rid of the police force. That's asinine to me. That just, and coming from someone, an ex-convict, we're the last group of people that you would think would stick up for the police.
Right.
And for me, it wasn't so much of standing up for the police. It was just speaking truth. There's a lot of people that make money off of chaos, fake leaders in the community that stir up people's emotions because it's easy to do, and then they run around trying to get paid for it. And I saw that, and I'm like, the people need to hear the truth. And the bottom line is, we need law enforcement, and law enforcement needs us. I often share, when people talk that we don't need the police crap, I often share Officer Jarvis. I saw you that night a couple of years ago. There was a shooting at the boxing situation,
Yep.
and I can't remember all the details, but I know there's an individual there that had a gun, was waving a gun around, and had everybody, women and children, scared, and was running out of the gym where the boxing thing was. We had a few hundred people running away from that man in that building. There's only one person that was running to that danger, and that was Officer Jarvis. I don't know anybody else that, unless you law enforcement, getting ready to do that. So I don't want to hear nothing about the value of law enforcement, the police officer, but it's just crazy to me, man. That whole conversation is crazy. And I think when you hear it, you got to really look at the person who's talking about it, because 9 times out of 10, there's an agenda behind it. And from what I've seen, is that agenda led to them being financially better off by stirring this chaos. So for me, I know our community had a long history of not trusting police, and that goes back to those beliefs we were talking about earlier when we grew up with: don't talk to the police, don't trust the police, yada, yada, yada. But who says that? People who are doing wrong.
Well, and now where we're at now, you tend to forget the journey, how you got here. But in my opinion, this partnership that you talk about, that is not just a blind partnership. Again, it's, I mean, you will call if you call it like you see it. So if you think an officer is doing something wrong, you will call the chief of police, right? But it didn't start all happy-go-lucky. No. So maybe tell us how it started over at Mama Mark's Park, because it didn't start from a real happy spot the way we're talking about it now.
No, it didn't. You know what, it didn't. And I got to own it. There was a shooting at the local park, and a little girl got shot. And it was
like 8, 9 years old, right?
10 years old.
Yeah.
And some of the guys that were there at the park, it was a really hot day that day, and some of the guys at the park, when the police got there, they took some of the young men and put them in the back of the cars because they weren't responsible for the shooting, and the police knew that, but they thought that they had information, witnesses. Yeah. So when I got there, like everybody else, there was an officer that blocked off the perimeter at the tape, and all he was doing was to make sure people didn't go on the scene. And I'm asking him, why you got these young men in the car? And he's like, well, they're potential witnesses and we want to talk to them. I said, that's bullshit. If this was your people, you wouldn't have them in the back of the car. It's 100-something degrees out here. Treat us like you treat your own family.
You're giving them business.
I was letting him have it. I was really letting him have it.
That don't sound like what we just talked about.
It didn't. It was evolution. But I was like, it was hot. And I didn't understand, the process of holding somebody to get information.
Right.
And so after about 10, 15 minutes, I'm like, if you guys, damn it, come be a part of the community instead of police the community, then stuff like this wouldn't happen. And he's like, well, man, I'd love to be a part of the community. The officer never broke professionalism. He's like, well, I'd love to be a part of the community. And I'm like, whatever. And he's like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm little league coach and yada, yada, yada. But that ain't got nothing to do with you, and I'm still giving it to him. So he said, well, give me your card and, I'll come out. So long story short, I gave him my card, and that day they ended up letting the guys out. A couple of months later, I get a call from this officer, Officer Lewis. And he says, hey, man, I'm getting to have some days off. I want to come out and help. And I was shocked that he followed up and he called, and I said, okay. So I said, well, we're in football now. Then it was baseball. I was like, we're in football now. He's like, I'll be there. So he came out to the practice, like he said, and we talked and walked him around and got him. He said, man, you know what? I'll be back. So the next day he came out, we were doing this huge workout, this huge training with about 200-something kids. And he brought his sergeant, which was Sergeant Chandler. So
He's a captain now.
He's the captain now of our department, of our area. So I'm like, man, you guys get involved, work out with the kids. Every kid had a training station all over the field. And so the Sergeant Chandler, who I didn't know was a decathlete or,
he's all sorts of things.
All sorts of things. He had the kids, he just jumped right in. And he had the kids doing all kind of stretches and all kind of stuff. Meanwhile, Officer Lewis didn't have a clue.
But he was there.
He was there. This dude, he was just standing there looking around. And I'm like, Lewis, get involved. But Lewis, he wasn't athletic. I'm going to just be nice. He wasn't athletic.
It's very similar to some of the other cats in Brother to Brother, I might add.
Yeah.
Certain softball games.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. But I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah. So Lewis, he was there, but he just was not helpful. Other than talking and engaging, he wasn't athletic. But long story short, they kept coming back, and they kept getting involved with the youth sports program, getting to know the parents, getting to know the kids. Even when we had a championship game in Elk Grove on a rainy Saturday, Officer Lewis was off work, and there was another officer, female officer with him. They came out to the game on their off day in junior pacer gear. And when we won, we had the fake champagne, and I literally got pictures of them spraying the champagne up with the teams. That was a relationship that was built, and since then it's grown. I remember one time they came, and we were in the stadium, and they brought the whole damn SWAT team. And
which normally means something.
Which normally means there's trouble, right? So the parents were sitting in the bleachers, and when the SWAT team came in, you can just see some of the dads and people moving further away from the SWAT team. But they came in, they went down on the field, they interacted with the kids. I think they had water guns or different stuff, but it was a beautiful experience, and kids, they got a chance to see the officers as the heroes that they are, that I remember growing up. And that's what we wanted to. That's how we started dispelling those myths about the police being the enemy and all that. These kids got a chance to interact with them, and it was a beautiful day. So, and ever since then, we've just been building relationships. And to this day, we have a great relationship. And when I was getting arrows in the backs of working with police and building these type of relationships, what people didn't realize that we were building relationships to help the community. Through those relationships, things like when a young man gets pulled over, he's driving without a license, without insurance. Before these relationships were built, that car was impounded and he was taken to juvenile hall or whatever. After these relationships are built, that's dealt with. Merv, I got this kid over here. Can you come get him and take this car? And this is how the community's benefited.
It doesn't put him even farther behind.
Yeah. So it's been a beautiful thing, and it's continued to grow. I mean, they're really heavily involved in the community. A lot of times they'll pull up, and where guys used to run, they don't run anymore because they know who you are. Right. And you talk like, well, man, you're getting kind of hot, you're getting kind of active, So and it's working.
One of the main tenets of this podcast is truth, to bring different opinions on so people can come to their own conclusions based on all the opinions. But the other big part of this podcast is how do we move forward to make tomorrow better for all people? And with that, you are working on a program in regards to gun violence. And as we've seen in this country, in Sacramento, in every major city across this country over the last couple of years, violence has skyrocketed.
Yes.
And gun violence specifically has gone up, and many, many people losing their lives. people involved in violence, innocent people just in the area, school shootings, community shootings, all these sort of things. And you have, not the sole solution to all of this, but you have not just an idea, because you are working on it and it's coming to fruition. Explain what that is in regards to gun violence.
Well, brother to brother, we also not only work with SAC PD, we work with the district attorney and alternative sentencing. And a lot of times when guys are trying to get alternative sentencing, the DA will give them a reduced sentence if they come join brother to brother and get involved in our program. Well, a lot of these guys, I would say like 90% over the past couple of years that we've been getting all have gun cases. Everybody. It's like the thing to do nowadays. Guns are so prevalent. So as I don't know what inspired it, but I was working with one young man, and I'm like, how do we address it? And I think what really tipped the cap was when the young man got killed at Grand Heights football game earlier in the year. That murder was committed by a 15-year-old kid that we had taken a gun from, brother to brother, taken a gun from 6 months prior. Now, this is not a kid that's gangbanging that you would see and know that this is just a regular kid that's following people.
He's a young Merv Brookins.
Yeah, in the blink of an eye, exactly. And I thought about, wow, what could we have done, And you hear people saying, man, that kid doesn't know, or he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand. And so I came up with the idea of creating a gun awareness class to help these young men play that tape forward. With that young man we've been able to take him through that class and show him what comes with carrying a gun, which is what he experienced. Eventually you use it, right? And your life changes. Help him play that tape for the consequences, not only for the families involved, for the community impacts himself, but the legal consequences. Now, well, the laws have changed now, but now he's sitting up facing a life sentence, whereas several months ago, he's just a happy-go-lucky kid on the street. Right. So what I came with is the idea is to elevate gun possession cases to the same level as DUI cases. If you catch a drunk driving, you're either going to jail or you're taking this class. Well, the same should be true with gun
and domestic violence is often
and
like
domestic violence, yes. So if you catch a gun possession, you're either going to jail or you're taking this class. And the class is intended to show you the real impact of what comes after that shot and what comes up after you pick up that gun.
So Merv, with all the stuff that you are doing, and I'm sure more stuff to come in helping not just Del Paso Heights, because a healthy Del Paso Heights is helpful for the rest of our city. If people want to get involved, whether it's help you with their time or help you with funding or any other way, how would they get a hold of you or brother to brother and go about that?
Well, right now our social media is being upgraded, so the best way to get involved is to give me a call directly at area code 916-604-0162. And 916-604-0162, and I'll get back to you and get you involved.
Awesome. One of the big purposes of A Way Forward is to hear different voices and different opinions, because that is how we can make informed decisions ourselves. So if you are someone that would like to come on A Way Forward to express your opinion, go to chiefhahn.com/podcast. chiefhahn.com/podcast.